Good morning and welcome to this NASHiCS webinar, Allergen Risk Management in a Care Setting. My name's Brett Edwards. I'm the National Chair for NASHiCS. And of course, welcome Naomi Bailey, who will be presenting this morning's webinar. If you've just joined us, if you could pop your name and the organisation that you're from in the chat, that would be fantastic. Just to let you know that this session will be recorded and the recording will be available on our website and to those attendees for a limited period of time, as will the presentation. So this presentation will be sent out to you on completion of this webinar. Just very quickly, a bit of housekeeping. In terms of questions, whilst the webinar is going through, if you've got any questions for clarity, please feel free to raise your hand. We'll stop the presentation and you can ask your question. If it's a general question about the content or personal circumstances, professional circumstances, please feel free to put the question in the chat. The reason for that is that will also be recorded, and if we do run out of time, then obviously we'll be able to pose those questions to Naomi after the webinar, and we'll be able to send out a Q&A crib sheet. Obviously, as I say, it is recording, and this webinar will finish at 11 o'clock. And it leads, well, the long and short of it is I'll very briefly introduce Naomi. Naomi Bailey has personal and professional experience of allergies and how to ensure safety. And following conversations we've had, I'm already fascinated by what I'm about to hear. I'm going to hand over to Naomi.
Thanks, Brett. So hi everybody, and thank you for joining me for this session on allergen risk management in a care setting. Hopefully you can all see my screen.
Yes.
So today I'm going to talk to you about allergy. I'll then talk about the 14 allergens and what it's like to live with allergies. I'll then talk you through Natasha's story and the law relating to allergy information. And then we'll finish up with allergen risk management and an opportunity for questions. So I'll quickly introduce myself. As Brett said, I'm Naomi Bailey. I'm a risk management and insurance professional. Most recently, I worked for Zurich Municipal as public services segment manager. And prior to that, I was a senior risk consultant for Zurich Resilience Solutions. I would say that my strengths lie in seeing how risk management links with claims defensibility. I'm also allergic to everything, such as that tasty looking ice cream on the plate there, which I thought was allergy friendly. It wasn't, and it wasn't even that tasty. So what is an allergy? Well, an allergy is the immune system's response to substances that are normally harmless to the body. In most people, these substances don't cause any problems, but in someone with an allergy like me, the body will think that it's under attack and will respond to that attack with an allergic reaction. And sometimes these reactions are fairly minor. You might get itchy or blotchy skin or a runny nose, but in serious cases, it can cause anaphylaxis, which can lead to upper respiratory obstruction, which can be fatal. An allergy is different to an intolerance, as intolerances are not life-threatening. They are still extremely uncomfortable, though, for the sufferer, and symptoms might include things like stomach pain, bloating, or severe headaches. And for example, many migraine sufferers are intolerant to foods such as chocolate or caffeine. Some of the most common allergies are to pollen from trees and grass, dust mites, mold, foods, obviously, as we're talking about today, animals like cats and dogs, insects such as bees and wasps, medicines like penicillin and aspirin, household products such as detergents, and also beauty products like hair dyes. It's estimated that around 44% of adults in Britain suffer from at least one allergy, and allergy is the most chronic disease in Europe. Now, according to the Natasha Allergy Foundation, this is rising by approximately 5% each year. Now, allergies first started to emerge back in the 1970s with a surge in asthma and in hay fever. And that was considered to be the first wave of allergies. And we're now experiencing a second wave of allergic disease with an increase in the number of people like me with life-threatening allergies. So why is this relevant to you? Well, the first wave of allergy was about 50 years ago. And as the number of people with allergies increases, so does the age of those people. Add that to a population that's living longer, and you'll see more people coming into care that have allergies. You may also be responsible for the care of younger people, and this is a generation who is increasingly becoming more allergic. So again, you're likely to encounter more service users with allergies. Now, for the purpose of this session, I am going to focus on food allergies. Now, the FSA uses the term people with food hypersensitivity, which is abbreviated to FHS. So you might hear me talk about this in the presentation. I don't know if we have hands here, but if we do, if we're able to put hands up or stick something in the chat. Does anybody here have an allergy? Obviously, I'll put my hand up. If we do have virtual hands, or if we can pop something in the chat, that would be great. Just always interested to know. Okay, so I'm seeing one hand up. Okay, thank you very much. Right then, so the 14 allergens. Food law specifies that there are 14 allergens that food businesses have to tell customers about. People might have other allergies. For example, one of my friends is allergic to banana, but these don't have to be declared by law. So do you know the 14 allergens? Perhaps have a go at writing them down or think about them in your heads. But just to give you a hint, they are in alphabetical order. So where's my mouse? There's my mouse. The first one is celery. That's a bit of an odd one, isn't it? Cereals containing gluten, so things like barley and oats. Crustaceans, so prawns, crab, etc. Lobsters, langoustines. Eggs. Fish. Lupin. This is, I found out recently, this is a sort of flower. We don't often have allergies to lupin in the UK. Milk, mollusks, things like mussels, oysters, mustard, peanuts, I think that's the one we hear a lot about, sesame, soybeans, and sulfur dioxide and sulfites. And this is specifically if it's in a certain concentration. So there's got to be quite a lot of sulfites. You often see it on bottles of wine, bottles of beer. And the last one is tree nuts, so all those different types of nuts that are listed there. So what's it like to have an allergic reaction? Obviously, a couple of you in the chat and put your hand up that you do have some allergies. So just to give you an idea, I'm allergic to dairy, eggs, unless they're baked in something like a cake, but I can't have raw egg or you know, cake that's not egg that's not very well cooked. I'm allergic to nuts and most fish. And I had my first allergic reaction as a baby while I was in hospital, and I've had many more since. Now, it all begins with a funny taste in my mouth. And I can't describe that taste, but I know it's the start of an allergic reaction. Next, I'll start to get lumps under my skin, sort of around the hairline, around the back of my neck. Sometimes they'll spread across my body. Next, my nose will start to run and I'll get really, really sneezy. My nose, lips, the inside of my mouth and my throat all start to swell up. That swelling then can move up to my eyes, which will go really puffy. And if it's really bad, that swelling might also reach my forehead. My skin might start to get itchy and my asthma might also trigger. To treat the reaction, I take antihistamines and drink lots of water to flush my body through. I carry an EpiPen, although, touch wood, I've never yet had to use it. And once you use an EpiPen or any other auto-injector, you have to go to hospital. And I don't want to have to do that, and unless I have to. Now, the next day after the allergic reaction, my throat will be really sore from all that swelling. I'll be really tired, completely wiped out. My face might still be puffy, and my skin might still be blotchy, and my stomach is usually really bloated from all that water that I've drunk. So this photo was taken a couple of hours after experiencing an allergic reaction. I'd eaten a kebab and chips on the way home from a music festival. Now, it was meat, salad, potato, bread, no dressings, no cheese. There should have been nothing in that I was allergic to. Now, on reflection, I suspect they probably used nut oil in the fryers, but that wasn't communicated, and to be honest, neither did I think to ask. This second photo was taken the morning after that allergic reaction. In the first photo, I was afraid to go to sleep in case I stopped breathing. In the second, I was exhausted from the attack on my body. And as you can see, my face is blotchy and the skin under my eyes is bruised from all that swelling. So that was my story. This is Natasha. On the 17th of July 2016, Natasha, aged just 15 at the time, bought a baguette from Pret-a-Manger in Heathrow Airport just before getting on a plane to go to Nice. There was no specific allergen information on the packaging, leading Natasha to believe that this was an allergen-free baguette. Unbeknown to Natasha, the baguette dough contained hidden sesame, an ingredient she was severely allergic to. Once on board the flight, she suffered an anaphylactic reaction to that sesame and died later that day. Pret-a-Manger had legally done nothing wrong. There was no requirement to name the allergens in that baguette. And the coroner stated, in my opinion, there is a risk that future deaths could occur unless action is taken. So at the time of Natasha's death, all food business operators had to declare the presence of the 14 major allergens that I talked about earlier. How they had to do that depended on the type of food business. So non-pre-packed or loose foods includes things like meals served in a restaurant, freshly made burgers bought from a drive-through, or food that you buy from perhaps a deli counter, like freshly sliced meat or cheese. And for these types of food, the food business operator had to give allergy information either verbally or in writing. Now, this could be a sign telling the customer to speak to a member of staff, or an allergy menu, for example. In the case of buffets, each food item must be separately labelled. And to give you an example of this, I was recently on holiday in Menorca, and they made it really easy to understand what allergens were present in the buffet. Each food item had a label saying what the food was, and the allergens were identified on that label using icons. So you had like a little egg for eggs, there was a milk jug for milk, nuts were really clear, everything was clear. The allergens were immediately obvious, and because they were in a picture form, it didn't matter what language you spoke, you could still understand the information you were being given. Pre-packed food for direct sale includes sandwiches made and packed on site and sold from the same premises, like the baguette that Natasha bought. Or it might be pre-packed foods from an in-store bakery, like a bag of donuts, for example. Allergen information had to be given verbally or in writing, and again, this could be a sign telling the customer to speak to a member of staff. Pre-packed food made off-site is food that's been pre-packed in a different location, such as a bar of chocolate, a packet of crisps, or a ready meal. And for these types of food, they had to have full labelling that states the name of the food, the full ingredients list and all allergens must be emphasised. So you'll see them in bold writing on the packet. And distance food is food purchased over the phone or online. So it's your takeaways, your Uber Eats, Deliveroo, etc. Allergen information must be provided before the purchase is complete, in writing or verbally. It must then be provided when the food is delivered, again, in writing or verbally. And it must also be available in a written form between the point the customer places the order and delivery of the item, and it must be labelled clearly. Now, in my experience of ordering takeaways, I've never been provided with information on delivery or been given any labelled food, and it's very rare to get allergen information in a written form at all. On the 1st of October 2021, Natasha's law came into force. Now, from this date, foods that are pre-packed for direct sale must now have a label containing the name of the food, the full ingredients, including allergens, and those allergens must be emphasised every time they appear on the list. And you'll note that that's the same requirements as for pre-packed food that's made off-site. Now, this change only applies to food that is pre-packed for direct sale, and there are no changes to the law on loose foods or pre-packed food made off-site or distance selling. So when food is provided by institutions such as care homes or day services, it's their responsibility to protect the individuals in their care. And for these people to be safe, pre-existing food allergies or intolerances should be made known, and processes must be in place to ensure they can have safe food options. And that's particularly important if the service user is unable or needs help to make food choices for themselves. In a care environment, there must be a care record outlining the individual's dietary needs. And there must be a process in place to ensure that these dietary needs on the care record are communicated to, and more importantly, understood by those that are serving the food or involved in the person's care. There will be some individuals that won't have a care plan, like visitors or employees, so it is good practice to ask if people have an allergy. Now, it's not currently a legal requirement to do this, but it is good risk management. And as we know, health and safety isn't just about complying with the law. Staff handling food and everyone involved in the person's care should receive appropriate training on the rules surrounding allergens and the institution's policy on food management. Now, what's appropriate will depend on the member of staff's role in the organisation. Now, why do we think it's important that everybody has some understanding of allergen management? Well, of course, we've got things like day trips, excursions, you might order takeaways in, you might be plating up for somebody else. So it's really important that everybody understands. And just to give you an example of this, so the picture that I showed you earlier, that lovely looking cake with the ice cream. So what happened here is I ordered a dessert that was, it was marked as vegan on the menu. Now that should mean that it doesn't have any dairy or eggs. A lot of vegan food, however, does have nuts, and obviously I'm allergic to nuts as well as dairy and eggs. So when I ordered this dessert, I double checked with the waitress. I said, can I just double check with you that it doesn't contain any nuts? She went away to the kitchen. Kitchen confirmed, nope, doesn't contain nuts, and I ordered that dessert. Now, when it came out, it looked great. I ate it, and right towards the end of eating it, I started to feel a bit funny, had that funny taste in my mouth that I was talking about, and I knew that there was something on that plate that I was allergic to. So I immediately notified the waitress. She went away and spoke to the kitchen. And what had happened is it was a completely vegan cake. There were no nuts in that cake. So the kitchen had given me the right information. But on the way out that dessert, so it had been served up as a cake. The person that was bringing that food out to me thought that it looked a bit small. And so thinking, oh, I'll do something nice, she added a scoop of ice cream, dairy ice cream, without understanding the implications of adding that scoop of dairy ice cream. So she was trying to do something nice, but actually it backfired. And I was a little bit poorly, ended up having to go to A&E to get checked out. So it's important that everybody involved in that, the delivery of that food, whatever it might be, is aware of the allergies and the implications. There should also be a process in place to monitor and review the performance of your caterers to ensure that they're managing allergens in the correct way and that they're competent. If deficiencies are found, there should be a contractual point of escalation and allowance in the contract for amendments or even termination if performance isn't up to scratch. Now, when it comes to defending claims, record keeping is really important. And I've said on their document control. Now, what I mean by this is making sure that if there is a claim, that the documents that you provide to your insurance company are the ones that were in force at the time and that the documents haven't been altered in any way. For example, if you're asked to provide a copy of a risk assessment, it needs to be the risk assessment that was in place at the time of that incident, not the current risk assessment if there have been any changes. Obviously, investigate incidents fully, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, and ensure that you do have fully documented procedures. Now, allergen risk management isn't just about complying with the law. It's about providing a good experience to your service users. So what can you do to make that experience as good as possible? Or be empathetic. People with food hypersensitivity are often embarrassed or think that other people think they're being awkward or picky. So show empathy. They're not just being picky. And as we've previously discussed, anaphylaxis can be a life-threatening condition. So let them know that you understand and reassure them that they're not being awkward. Now, my friends and family, to put me at ease, they talk about foods being Naomi friendly. And you can find similar ways to put your service users at ease. If you're in control of choosing menus, try to design out allergens. The hierarchy of risk control that we know from the health and safety world says that elimination is the most effective control. So try to eliminate allergens where possible. You can avoid adding allergens by removing others. And an example of this, Ben & Jerry's did this with their vegan ice cream. They removed dairy from their ice cream, but they replaced it with almond milk. So by making it suitable for dairy allergy sufferers, they've now excluded nut allergy sufferers. I tell you what, I was so excited when I saw that Ben & Jerry's were making a vegan ice cream. I thought, yeah, this is my time. I can finally eat Ben & Jerry's, but because I'm allergic to nuts, I still can't. So try to avoid adding allergens by removing others. Unnecessary allergens are a huge bugbear of mine. And there are all sorts of products, including beef-flavoured hula hoops, chorizo sausage, salami, pulled pork, and breaded scampi that include milk, where there appears to be no benefit or reason for them to have milk. So do the allergens actually add anything to the food? And if they don't, eliminate. Choice is important to allergy sufferers. I spent 3 days in Wales last summer, and I had no choice about what to eat on any of those 3 days, as there was only one thing that I could eat on the menu at each of the establishments I visited. And when you've just spent 7 hours climbing Mount Snowdon, you want food and you want to be able to choose it. And the last point on my slide, for me, summarises the key point of Natasha's law. People with food hypersensitivity need accurate, easy to access information to help them to make informed decisions. Now think back to my Menorcan buffet experience. Simple, clear information that anyone could understand because it was in picture form. I also mentioned earlier in this slide about asking if people have allergies. And not only is this good practice because it helps you manage the risk, but it's also good practice in terms of helping the person feel at ease and demonstrating that you understand their needs. The food is a basic necessity of life, but it's even better if you can enjoy it. On the last slide, I mentioned the hierarchy of risk control. So I thought I'd just talk through a practical example of how it might be applied to allergen risk management. And as you probably know, the controls at the top are the most effective and the ones at the bottom are the least effective. So let's apply this to ordering a burger. Your typical burger might come with a beef patty, a brioche bun, cheese, mayonnaise, relish, and salad. Now this includes a whole range of allergens, including milk, cereals, including gluten, egg, celery, mustard, and soya. Now the most effective control is elimination. Design out the allergens. So your basic burger offering could be a plain beef patty in a plain bun. This immediately removes milk, egg, celery, mustard, soya. It's not the most exciting burger on the planet, so you could offer a build your own burger so that service users can add the extras that they want. And I did this recently at a local pub and I built the most amazing burger. It was allergy friendly and it gave me options. And remember, we do like options. The next control is substitution. So can you offer something different? A gluten-free bun, for example, for those with a cereal allergy. But if you do substitute, be careful that you don't add other allergens like Ben & Jerry's did with their vegan ice cream. Next, we come to engineering controls, and I'm thinking segregation of workstations for preparing allergy-friendly meals, for example. Or you could provide labelled sauce on the table so individuals can add their own sauce, obviously because the allergens will be listed in bold on the back of that sauce. The next control is administrative controls. So think about the information that you provide and how it's provided. And for something like a burger, it can be useful to break down the allergens of each component part. You may have heard in the news a few years ago, a lad called Owen Carey ordered a burger, a chicken burger in, I think it was Byron Burger. It was his 18th birthday, and Owen was very allergic to dairy. Now, the burger contained buttermilk, which he was allergic to, but there was nothing in the breakdown on the menu about this buttermilk on the chicken. Owen ate that burger and he died on his 18th birthday from eating that burger. So had they actually listed out the component parts on that burger, he never would have eaten it and he would have lived past the age of 18. And finally, the least effective control is PPE. Now that makes me think of Bubble Boy. I don't know if you've heard of this. I don't know if it's real or if it's just one of these stories, but Bubble Boy, he's a little boy that goes around in a giant plastic bubble to protect him from all of the allergens because he's allergic to absolutely everything. And whilst that's amusing, I don't think obviously it would be practical in reality. Elimination of the allergen in the first place is always going to be the most effective option. Now I said I'd talk about incident reporting. And this question, when I deliver this type of session, this question always comes up. So I thought I'd do a slide on incident reporting. And is it reportable? Well, unfortunately, the guidance is unhelpfully unclear. As I'm sure we're all aware, if an employee or a non-employee dies as a result of an accident in the workplace, it must be reported. Accidents to third parties must be reported if they result in an injury and the person is taken directly to hospital for treatment. they must also be reported. But the use of the terms accident and injury do cast some doubt on whether or not an allergic reaction is reportable. Now, in reality, I think it probably depends on the circumstances. So, for example, if a service user is given a food that they're known to be allergic to and is then taken to hospital for treatment, I think, yes, it's most likely reportable. If, on the other hand, you're holding a coronation party, for example, and a family member brings in a cake that then causes an allergic reaction to somebody, I think possibly the HSE might not be quite so interested in that. But in my opinion, I would always err on the side of caution. I'd rather report it and then be told actually it doesn't need reporting than not report it and later find out that it should have been reported. Now, in terms of incident reporting, you need to treat allergic reactions in the same way as any other incident. An incident report should be completed as soon as is practically possible. Obviously, that might not be straight away if the person's been taken to hospital. But it should always be investigated in the same way as you would investigate any other incident. And why do we think that's important? Well, obviously, the incident investigation allows you to identify the root cause of that allergic reaction and to introduce measures to prevent a reoccurrence through things like reviewing the risk assessment, through reviewing your systems, providing training, etc. And it also provides evidence in the event of a civil claim and can help you to defend potential claims or settle them quickly where liability is found to attach. Another question I get asked, oh, I've gone past it. Should we ban nuts? Very common question. And the guidance from Anaphylaxis UK is that they don't recommend total bans on any allergens, as they can be very difficult to enforce. As we've heard today, there are a whole range of things that people can be allergic to. You've got the 14 allergens, plus all those weird and wonderful things like my friend is allergic to bananas. People are allergic to all sorts of things. So it would be impractical to try to ban every allergen. And it can also create a false sense of security. So instead, they recommend allergen risk awareness for all of those that are involved in the care of that person. I've put this slide together with some resources that I think are quite useful. There's a great link in there to some free online allergy training by the FSA. I've done it. It took me about an hour, something like that. Really, really good training course. There are some other links there as well to some things that I think might be useful for you. There is a whole range of information out there. This is just a small snippet. I couldn't fit everything onto this one slide. So you do go searching for it. Do Google. The Food Standards Agency has some great stuff on there, and you might find links to other information while you're doing your Google search. So we are nearly at the end of the presentation, and I just wanted to talk you through the photo on this slide, which is an example of where the kind of the service user, the customer service bit of allergen management was absolutely spot on. So I was on holiday in Devon and I fancied a cake. I'd had a bit of a bad luck around getting food in Devon. I'd wanted Cornish pasties, I couldn't have those. I'd wanted something else, couldn't have that. And I really, really fancied cake. So my partner and I, we did some Googling and we managed to find a local tea room. On their website, they mentioned words like vegan and dairy free. So we called ahead and the lady on the phone reeled off a whole list of things that I could have. She then asked if I'd like a scone or scone, depending on where you're from. And if I did want a scone, she said she'd bake me some fresh. So of course I said, yes, please. And she took all the details of my allergies. And we then headed down for freshly baked scones. Now the scone came out with a little dish of freshly whipped dairy-free, nut-free cream and a lovely little note demonstrating a full understanding of all of my allergies while complying with the requirement to inform customers of the presence of allergens. So in this case, the scone contains soya, which she'd put on the note. To top it all off, she baked me 2 scones. So I got one to have for the road So I was a happy customer, and of course I took to social media to tell my tale. So thanks everybody for listening to me. I hope that this session has been useful and that it's given you an insight not only into the law around allergens, but also how this impacts the allergy sufferer.
Thank you, Naomi. That was extremely informative, and I will back that up by saying that there are actually no questions in the chat. However, I do have a couple of questions, and I'm sure if anybody else would like to pose any questions, then feel free to do so in the chat. And I've just seen something pop up. So we have got one. It says, thank you so much for the presentation. I was wondering what your thoughts are around providing spare generalized auto injectors to care settings in the same way that defibs have been over the last 5 to 10 years.
Okay, that's a great question. And I read something recently on, I think it was on LinkedIn. There is a company that is trying to do exactly this. And I can't for the life of me remember what they're called. So what I can do is find that out afterwards and drop Brett a note to share. But I think it's a great idea. It's I think at the moment it is just a sort of the beginnings of an idea, but I think it makes sense to have spare auto injectors, and there are a couple of reasons for this. Auto injectors, when they're prescribed to you, they don't last very long. I've been told anecdotally by a pharmacy that this is done on purpose because you have to carry one, and it makes the pharmaceutical companies more money. Whether or not there's any reality in that statement, I don't know, but they generally only last about a year from getting them. So very often people are carrying around these things that have gone out of date a year or so earlier. So they're not going to be as effective as they should be. They're massive, so carrying these things around is difficult. You're supposed to carry two, because if you potentially, if people fumbling because they're either scared or they've never injected somebody before, very often the first one will get dropped. So it's good to have a backup. Sometimes the first one isn't enough, so a second one needs to be applied. So carrying two auto injectors around is quite chunky, especially if you're a lady with a small handbag. It doesn't go with the outfit. And also teenagers are forgetful, let's say, and a bit embarrassed. Young people are embarrassed by carrying these things around. So there's all number of reasons why people don't have them or they won't work. So yeah, long story short, great idea, in my opinion.
Thank you. I'm sure James got the answer he was looking for. So I'm going to chuck in a question here, and it's a very generalised one. Do you have any kind of thoughts on why we are seeing an increase in allergies?
I think there's been a lot of research on this. I don't think anybody's really got to the bottom of it. Possibly something to do with the way that people are living nowadays. I would say there's more presence of allergens. People are exposed to things like car fumes, and these things can make, I think they can make allergies worse. Our cities are becoming more built up than they were, before the first wave of allergies started to appear. On the flip side, we're also, I would say, things are a bit cleaner. We're a bit more sanitized, and I think that perhaps that because it's an autoimmune disorder, we're not building up that immunity to these things that perhaps we would have done in the past. So I think the jury's out on it, but that's possibly it. And a lot of the time it's hereditary as well. So my allergies, we believe, are hereditary. Both my brother and myself have the same sorts of allergies. We both have asthma and eczema as well, and the three tend to go together. And usually if you've had somebody else in your family with allergies or asthma or eczema, then you're more likely to then have it yourself. Mine is my uncle on my mother's side. He had eczema as a child, and he was allergic to egg. So we think that that's then been passed on to myself and my brother. And my brother's children, one of them has an allergy, or had an allergy to milk when she was a baby, but she's grown out of that.
It's interesting because you've just led me on to my next question around, obviously we're talking about care settings, and you've got children's homes and those care settings for younger people, and when we were talking previously, we talked about care settings in terms of older care. Do you think that obviously we've seen quite a significant increase in diagnosis around significant intolerance and allergies, which I appreciate are slightly different, in younger people. Do we think that that's likely to then carry up through to the older generations in years to come? Or do we find that actually people can grow out of allergies?
Yeah, it is an interesting question. People can grow out of allergies. Again, another bit of anecdotal information. I've heard this from specialists, but others think it's completely rubbish. But some people talk about 7-year cycles of allergies. And people with eczema obviously find that they get flare-ups after, every 7 years. Things like egg, milk allergies, even nut allergies now, if they're caught early and treated early, there are treatments that can try to reduce the impact, and basically it's giving children small amounts of the allergen. Back in my day, when I was diagnosed with allergies, it was a complete opposite advice. It was, the advice was don't give the child that allergen. So I never built up that immunity. And they say, as you get older, you're less likely to be able to build up that immunity. So children basically up to sort of about the age of 18, 19, it can be quite successful. But also people do develop allergies as they get older as well, which I've done. When I was 19, I became allergic to fish pretty much overnight, which is very strange because I'd always eaten fish, and then suddenly serious allergic reaction. But yeah, I think it's difficult to know. I think if it is treated early, yes, that it might be possible to remove it. But I think overall, we are becoming more allergic. So I think you are going to see it still coming through, and year on year, there are going to be increases.
Thank you. And then I've got one last question. Natasha's law has changed quite a bit of the legislation and how we kind of manage it. And I would say probably more in the public domain than necessarily in sort of, the corporate domain, I guess, or our domain, the care sector. But from your perspective, what would you like to see in terms of changes to legislation?
Yeah, so after Natasha's law was successful, so Natasha's family campaigned for this law to happen. There's been a second campaign. I mentioned the story of Owen Carey, who died after eating that burger in Byron. Now this was a loose food, or a non-pre-packed food, and as you'll probably recall, the information can be provided verbally or in writing, but there's no requirement for the establishment to provide that information unless somebody asks for it. And that burger, the information wasn't broken down, so the buttermilk wasn't identified. So Owen's family have been campaigning for a law requiring all of the individual component parts to be broken down on the allergy information, and for all of those establishments that provide loose foods to have all of that information. Now, so far, that hasn't been successful. There were some other things that they were campaigning for, but personally, I would love to see that, because it just makes it much easier to decide where to eat, what to eat, and it gives you much more confidence. I mentioned, having that information gives the allergy sufferer or the person with the intolerance much more confidence. And as we saw in Menorca, they provided all of that information on the buffet just in pictogram form, which it wasn't hard. There wasn't loads and loads of writing they had to put on it. It was literally, here's a fish, there's an egg, there's a milk jug. Simple and effective. So yeah, I would love to see Owen's law come into effect. Really, that would be my wish.
Okay, good. Thank you. I'm not seeing any more questions. Oh no, sorry, I lie. I've just had a question come up. Do you think that there are likely to be things added to the allergen list in the coming years?
I do, yeah. The 14 allergens, I can't think how long ago that they were first sort of put into EU law. It's quite some time ago now. Things change. I know also it's obviously our law is based on the EU law, as we probably all know, and but what people eat in different countries is different, and what people might be allergic to in different countries is also different. So actually, now that we've moved out of the EU, I wonder if there is a bit of an opportunity for us to review that allergens list, and there might be more specific allergens that the UK may be able to add to it. I'm pretty sure I read something recently about possibly adding some new allergens. So I'll see if I am able to find that, I'll try and dig it out again and share that with Brett. I'll let you know if I'm just making that up, but I'm pretty sure I saw something. Whether or not I can find it again is another matter.
Okay, thank you. I have to say thank you again. That was an excellent presentation, and I have to say extremely informative. I've learned quite a bit, and we've had a number of conversations, and I still managed to pick up quite a bit from that presentation. Really, really good. So realistically, it's a thank you very much to everyone. As I say, the presentation has been recorded. It will be made available to you following this. Equally, the presentation slides will be available to you. And of course, we will send out our usual feedback form. It'd be fantastic to get an understanding of how you received this presentation, which again, thank you, Naomi. It was really, really good. And thank you for giving up your time to pass that information on. And hopefully we'll see some of those changes come to fruition in the near future. All it leaves for me to say is that, of course, just a reminder of our summer seminar, which is on the 15th of June. We have Professor Dame Carol Black speaking around wellness, around work, well-being. Chris Callow from the National Fire Chiefs Council will be talking about the Building Safety Act. We have Eleanor Kinman and John Crooks from HSE talking about violence and aggression. Julia Atherton from Barchester Healthcare will be talking about a case study not directly linked to this, around a choking incident. And we have Phil Clark, who will be talking around health and safety in the care sector. Obviously, it will be a fantastic networking opportunity. There will be a drinks reception in the late afternoon, early evening, and we will tail off with our AGM, where we will be discussing the nominations for the National Executive. So thank you very much all for attending and participating in the questions. And thanks again, Naomi. That was excellent. I wish you all a safe journey back to wherever you're going to and the rest of your week. Thank you very much.